Welcome back to season 6 of the Lib Dem Podcast, and we are starting this podcast with an absolutely stellar interview with one of the most important seats of the year, and we are delighted to welcome the man at the centre of that, and that is Cllr Mike Ross, the leader of Hull City Council, and first time on the podcast. Hi, Mike.
Hello, really good to be with you. I just hope I live up to that star billing you gave me the introduction. Thank you very much for that.
Well, if you don't, our other panelists will absolutely put you in your corner. And join us again is podcast favourite and one of the most important members of the team is Hannah Kitchen. Hello, Hannah. Welcome back.
Hi, John. Welcome. Thanks for the ego boost, as always.
Oh, I try. You can tell it's in the morning, so I still haven't been depressed by the news. And we realise, listeners and viewers, that we have had a little bit of a hiatus at the start of this year. But luckily, nothing important has been going on either in local government, world news, British politics. So I'm sure we haven't missed a single thing. But we are delighted to be back as we start now ramping up towards the local elections in England, the county elections, and some of the big mayoral tests that have got to come. It's very exciting, Mike. And I suppose for our listeners who want to understand a little bit about this, it's probably worth talking about a little bit about the geography of this thing, because it's fair to say, and we have never actually, as Lib Dems, won one of these large seats. This would be the first. And it's probably talking about the scale of it. I mean, you said just before we came on, it's actually 6 parliamentary constituencies. So give us a little bit of the geography of where you're trying to take this year.
Yeah, so I mean, I have been a councillor in Hull now for it'll be 23 years this May, and one of the things I've really enjoyed about being a councillor in Hull is the flat nature of the place. Lots of terraced housing, really easy to deliver. Now this challenge of the geography of this Hull East Yorkshire Combined Authority is over, I think, about 1,000 square miles. A lot of it obviously is farmland and fields and like. So it is massive. I mean, it's not quite the scale to say of North Yorkshire, but it is really big. And just early in the campaign, popping around to get photos of teams, it'd be like an hour to drive across the patch, just get some photos and then come back. So real sort of difference to what I've done before. It is big, 6 parliamentary, it's quite opportune, Series 6 parliamentary constituencies, all with their own challenges, all with their own differences. You've got the urban Hull, and then you've got the more rural East Riding, coastal patches, so places like Bridlington, Wivensea, Hornsea. Then you've got places like Goole in the west of the patch. So it's a real varied area, and really sort of looking forward to the challenge of hopefully getting elected and being serving the whole patch.
And we're going to talk a little bit about some of the issues you face when scaling up. From a campaign. I mean, you guys in Hull are obviously highly successful, but to put it in some sort of context that some people might. So the 6 parliamentary constituencies are basically 450,000 electors. You've got nearly 260,000 doors. So that is. I mean, Lib Dems love a door knock, Mike, but that is a large set of doors you've got to do there.
No, and it's immense. And you talk about the party's never won one of these Metro Mayor elections before, and I think there are reasons for that. And one of those reasons, undoubtedly, is just the scale of it. We are very good at winning council elections. We've done well in recent years again at winning control of councils. We had a fantastic general election a few months back where we managed to win all these 72 parliamentary seats, but to win across a patch like this is a big challenge because our campaigns work in the way they do well in the sort of council level, and sometimes we're able to concentrate in one parliamentary constituency. To do it across 6 at the same time is a challenge because the resources are the same. You're having to spread them across more. So one of the things I say is thank you to all those people who have come from outside our patch already and helped. It's made a really big difference. I cannot sort of underestimate just how much of a difference that has helped. I would encourage people to keep coming and bring more people to do so, because to get this done, we're going to need a lot more help. And then it's just a case of also, say we've got a good track record in Hull. The East Riding side as well. The last local elections, East Riding Council, they became the largest opposition group with 20 odd councillors there, and that actually has really helped. We are the largest by far in terms of number of councillors across the patch. So we do, although it's a challenge, we probably do have the most significant infrastructure across the whole region, and that is going to be crucial the next few weeks ahead.
Hannah, also your role with in the Yorkshire, and you being a campaign chair and things like that in that side of the country. Obviously, what Mike's just said. Obviously, we have 31 out of 57 councillors in Hull, 21 out of 67 in East Riding. So, giving us about 42% of all the councillors. But what's really crucial in this fight is that Labour have only 5 councillors in East Riding, and the Tories have 0 councillors in Hull. So, of the big 3. We're in a really unique position by actually being strong in both patches.
Yeah, that's right. So, as you said, John, I've been the campaigns chair across Yorkshire and Humber for the last couple of years. And this year, I'm actually the chair of the region of Yorkshire and Humber. And I think when you say we as a party have never won one of these large mayoral elections before, I think it's important to take that back a step. We've never actually seriously contested one of these large mayoral elections before. Across the rest of Yorkshire, certainly, because the other 3 sub-regions all have a mayor already, the goal has been keeping the deposit, because the deposits for these elections are massive. They're at least £5,000. You then have to pay another £2,500, £3,000 to get your manifesto included in a booklet that goes to every single door in the area. And that's a huge amount of money for local and regional parties to scrape together. And so the goal really has been getting that 5% and keeping that, which some people might think is a little bit unambitious. But when you look at the scale of victory, the Labour victory across the South and West Yorkshire ones, like Andy Burnham's victory in Greater Manchester, they're just insurmountable mountains that we've never been able to tackle. So there's a few things that put this one on the campaign team's radar. It probably doesn't feel like it, Mike, but it is a little bit smaller than some of the others. Only 6 parliamentary constituencies. I think South Yorkshire is about 14, and it's obviously somewhere where we are strong in both sort of sides of it. So really, really strong in Hull, running Hull City Council, that large opposition group in East Riding. And it's, as you say, we fight Labour in one part and we fight the Conservatives in the other. So there was no obvious sort of clear winner for this one, like there is in the likes of West Yorkshire and Greater Manchester. There might also be the small detail as well that the party's director of campaigns, Dave McCobb, is an actual councillor in Hull, and I believe the chair of Hull local party this year as well. So that level of sort of inside, on the ground knowledge is absolutely immense. Basically, Dave certainly has a skill for spotting a winning opportunity. And then there's also the fact that the big round of elections, local elections this year, is the counties. We don't have county councils in Yorkshire. So whereas we appreciate across the rest of the country, so like John's in Lancashire, fighting county council elections, we know not as many people are fighting county council elections as we'd expected. But in Yorkshire, we've got a situation where all of our campaigners across the majority of South, West and North Yorkshire have got a fallow year. So therefore, it was a really good opportunity to throw all of our campaigning resource in Yorkshire and Humber into getting Mike elected as mayor.
John, just as Hannah mentions, my esteemed colleague Dave and long-time friend, Dave is very good at. He obviously knows the patch and knows the issues and knows we can win it. He's also very good at sort of which hat he's wearing when, just to be very clear. But he's really on that point though. Dave does see this as very, very winnable, and I think when Dave McCobb thinks we can win it, we normally can.
Yeah, but Mike, does that add a certain level of pressure to you as well?
Dave?
No, not to be Dave. No, but actually, just because you're used to you've been leading Hull since 2022. You've been obviously a councillor for over 20 years, as you've mentioned. But is this another kind of pressure? Because I might be completely wrong. You'll think of the metro mayors and other mayors. It's quite personality driven as well. You know, you think of people talk about the burn and bounce or whatever else. I mean, is that a level of pressure on you as a candidate to really up your game?
Well, I think it's the personal aspect you talk about there. I think is certainly very relevant in the sense of, so yeah, I've been a councillor for 23 years. I've been around this politics and local government for well before that. My mum was a councillor in Sussex and first got elected in 1991. So pretty much most of my life I've been around this in some sense. It is just different with these, and it is an election. And you know, it occurred to me, like the first time I went door knocking for this election, I thought, oh, what do I say? But I actually pretty quickly realised, hey, just treat it as a normal election in that sense. When you go door knocking, engaging with voters, it's still a normal election. But as a candidate in this one, does feel different because it is, as you say, much more about the individual. You know, when you're standing for election to council, yes, you're standing as an individual, but you're doing it on a party banner and you're doing it with a group of other people who are doing so on the same day at the same time, and that sort of team feel. This is very different. Like, people are going to go vote in this election, and there'll be some people who will vote because they always vote a certain way, and there'll be some people because it is very much about they know the person. And yeah, on the advantage of that is I've been leader of the council now for the last few years. I've been around for a long time, but you know, think I'm quite well known in the area, and that will help. The pressure, though, as you say, it does become very personal then, and much more so than even being leader of the council. I think mayors are seen as that person rather than that office.
Yeah, and I suppose some of our listeners, I know, will be very interested because obviously, in about, you know, there's controversies within Lib Dems about whether we support these sort of mayors. Yeah. But the point is, regardless of that, we've got to win them. If there's an election for a seat, we've got to win them. So, what is the extra powers you would get as a mayor beyond some like a normal council leader, for example?
I think there is that sort of real elephant in the room issue for us as Lib Dems on this one, and it is a bit weird because why we're going down this route here is when we took control of the council in 2022. There had been no progress really in getting devolution done for this part of the world, and that had seen essentially the rest of Yorkshire got sorted with devolution deals, and Hull East Yorkshire had been left out essentially and was not getting stuff. And for those who know about how this works, I know that more funding and more benefits are accrued for those areas are part of devolution than not. Now, I'm not going to pass comment about whether that is right or wrong. I have my views, obviously, but essentially that was the system that the government dealt with. And so we took the pragmatic view eventually of having tried to push for a non-mayoral deal and getting nowhere. The government of actually, we need to put the interest of this region first. And so we ended up going down the mayoral route. And so it does bring extra powers in terms of responsibilities around things like economic development, skills agenda, strategic transport. And so the mayor in that sense is quite, I hesitate to use the word powerful, but they are quite a powerful figure in that, in terms of that remit. I think what we have here in electing a Liberal Democrat is doing it in a Liberal Democrat way and being a mayor that would then involve and work with people in a way that, you know, we see across the country where Liberal Democrats run councils. You know, we have this mantra here about being a listening council, and I've said, you know, if I became mayor, I'd be a listening mayor.
Yeah, and I suppose, Hannah, it's an interesting point in time at the moment. I mean, don't know from your point of view, and Mike, you can chip in after Hannah, about if we've ever known a political landscape in Britain so fractured. You know, but the other side of that, does that give the Lib Dems, if you excuse the pun, a golden opportunity that actually, you know, the fracturing of particularly the right vote, etc., is actually really useful to Lib Dems at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a massive opportunity. I've already laid out the reasons, you know, why this election has been seen as that opportunity. You know, for the last couple of years, to be honest, by the Yorkshire team, we've been talking about this for some time now, that when this one comes up, it'll be worth going for. And I think the current sort of political landscape enhances that, really, rather than detracting from it. A lot of those, what you're often up against in these huge elections is just fundamental party loyalties. This is when the donkey vote comes out, because, you know, the Labour and Conservative candidates, they don't even try to go out and knock on every door. They don't even try to go and deliver literature to every door. They just rely on that base vote turning out and supporting them. And those traditional party loyalties are crumbling. at the moment, to be honest. I think we can see that everywhere. We saw that to some extent, I think, in the general election, with the way the vote split, not necessarily the seats, but certainly the vote. We'll see that again. I mean, it's interesting, of course, we need to remember that the last government changed the way that these mayors are elected. So they were elected initially. Oh, Lib Dems are going to hate me. I don't know if it was AV or STV. It was a ranked one anyway. It's not my wheelhouse, that. And the Conservatives changed it to first past the post. And, the Labour government have made it very clear they have no intention of changing it back from first past the post. We worked out how to make first past the post work for us in the general election. So, I'm pretty sure we can do it again. But I think the best of these mayors elevate themselves above party politics. So I think we're seeing that less in some of the newer ones. But I mean, I've ran to be South Yorkshire Mayor twice. I've made no secret of the fact that I genuinely think it is the best job in politics. I've already told Mike I'll be immensely jealous if he gets this job. And, part of that is around the power, because they are powerful. They are powerful figures in terms of being able to transform communities and the area that they serve. But it's also when they're done well, if you look at the way that Andy Street and Andy Burnham, to be honest, to some extent, did this, particularly when they were first elected and it was really just them, they've always sat above that sort of petty party politics. And I think having mayors of different, elected under different flags round that table would be hugely useful for breaking back down some of that sort of politics. I mean, I don't think there's many Labour politicians who are, resorting to petty party politics at the minute, because they're on a pretty weak footing, really. But in terms of getting the best for your region, that's the way to do it. And we do that, as Mike says, all the time when we run councils.
I suppose, Mike, if you think of someone, even though he just lost his seat, it was Andy Street in the West Midlands, who generally was sort of out of the tail end of that Tory government, was thought to come out with actually some credibility intact in actually and things like that. So is that something you're very conscious of as well, in terms of this, like I say, with the political agenda at the moment being so fragmented, that actually you do have an opportunity to be slightly above it?
Yeah, absolutely. Hannah's point there around being above party politics where they've done well is right. I think, fundamentally, people don't sort of completely leave their political badge at the door, but they do so acting in what they think is the best interest of the region. I think, as I said before, we are going down this route because we took a pragmatic view rather than, let's say, a closely party policy position. And I appreciate not every Liberal Democrat would necessarily be happy with that, but we took the view of, well, what's in the best interest of the region we serve, and I think that has to be the approach. In terms of the fragmented nature of politics at the moment, it is amazingly fragmented, and I've been doing this a long time. I can't really recall quite such a fragmented nature as this in my time. I think it possesses or poses both opportunity and challenge. I think it's, in terms of electoral opportunity, there is a real opportunity there. When the other parties are so fractured, the opinion polls for Reform, Labour, Conservative, all bouncing around the same sort of mark. And while we might be low in that, we know that where we then did a sustained effort, we can actually come through and win. And I think, hopefully this will be an example of that. The challenge is actually, where is this leading us? Where, with the fragmented nature of those other parties, like I don't think anybody has truly worked out a way to deal with the Reform challenge yet. Not head on. Now, part of that might be actually the best way of challenging is by not challenging them directly head on and doing what you normally do and doing it well, and that being the antidote. But at the moment, I think Reform are being given free rein and free ground to actually get the coverage that they want. We don't know, for example, who the candidate for Reform is in this election. There's going to be a big announcement in the coming days at an event they're holding. Whoever they stand will get a vote because they're standing on a Reform label, and that is a challenge.
that might work for you is because we've talked about how Labour and the Tories, obviously, I mean, Labour has hemorrhaged votes everywhere since the general election. Tories, okay, there may be a slightly lessening of the anger against the Tories, but there's certainly no extra love for the Tories, and lots of questions about Kemi Badenoch's leadership already starting to arise.
I don't see any evidence yet that the Tories are recovering. I think the Tories are still have way to go down rather than up. Kemi Badenoch, you feel for her to an extent. She's a new leader in difficult times, take over, all that sort of stuff. But so far, there's nothing that indicates she will have the ability to turn things around. Her style, I think, leaves a lot to be desired. In terms of Labour, I think there's a lot of buyer's remorse out there from Labour voters in last year's general election when we're knocking on doors. There are a lot of people who certainly say, well, I'm not voting for them again. And I think I would at best say their political handling has been poor and naive. Doing things like the winter fuel, whether it's the right policy or not, obviously disagree with it, but whether it's the right policy or not, doing that so early and in isolation as well was really
leaving it out there for like 3 months.
Yeah. Like if it had been part of wider budget measures, one of many things that people could pick at, but just to leave it on its own like that was just really, really poor. So I don't have confidence that they have the political handling to actually keep people with them on side. And I think if a general election was to be held now, it would be a very, very messy outcome. It'd be very hard to predict actually what would happen.
And I do wonder, it's interesting, and I'll bring Hannah on this in a second, but it's interesting that we just had some polling come out yesterday that I saw about actually Lib Dems being the least toxic of all the parties, which is obviously that is not actually, we're not going to put that on your banner. No. Vote Mike, he's the least toxic. But what it did show is the amount of people who would consider voting Lib Dem versus people who would never consider voting Lib Dem.
Listen, if they'll vote for me, I'll take the vote. Whoever there is to vote for me, I'm fine with it.
But it showed that Lib Dems are on +6, the Cons are on -2, Greens are on -3, Labour's on -5, and Reform's on -7. We are the only net positive party in the whole of the country where actually people are, and whether that's, we've kind of got an anti-establishment label, a bit like Reform at the moment. But Hannah, I suppose again, it's a really big opportunity because for those of us that survived coalition, like myself and like Mike did, it's nice to not have that immediate pressure on our back that everyone has a really set view of something negative about you.
And I think these mayoral elections are helpful because they are essentially local elections, so they're about local services, they're about transport infrastructure, they're about skills and learning, they're about the things that are really kind of like tangible and visible for people. And
I should just say, second photo on Mike's website is him pointing at a pothole. I think that was exceptional work, Mike.
Can I just like to say, as ever, one of the first bits of literature we did to people was a survey, and I have the joy of having the survey sent to my house, so I won't go into reasons why, but I do. And the first survey I opened up, what can a mayor do? All the powers the mayor has. What can the mayor do for you? Sort out potholes. And I thought this just encapsulates exactly what people, and I get it, I understand, grand vision that mayors can do, but what they really wanted was pothole sorting.
I mean, you're going to get two answers there, aren't you? You're either going to get sort the potholes or stop the boats. And, you can, and I think where that toxicity around the political climate is, and when it comes to sort of parliamentary elections, you end up getting dragged into those sorts of conversations that we as Liberal Democrats don't particularly want to have on the doorstep with reform-leaning voters. In the mayoral election, just as in the local elections, you can say that I'm not going to be an MP. I'm not going to be part of the government. Your pay grade is it will be a good pay grade. It'll be a good job, but that's stuff's above your pay grade. That's up to the government to deal with. And I always think it's easier in local elections. Obviously, everyone knows I campaign in Barnsley. I find it really helpful to be able to say this is local council stuff. Talk to me about the stuff that's in your community. Talk to me about your roads, your potholes, education, social care, that kind of thing, because they're the stuff that will be in Mike's gift if he wins this. I think it makes it a lot easier to diffuse some of those potentially more toxic conversations. So Mike is right, Reform are going to get a massive chunk of this vote. I think it's just that message about reminding people that, well, it's the squeeze. What's your squeeze, Mike?
Well, I mean, we see this as very much as between us and Labour for various reasons. As saying earlier, at the moment, the Conservatives have no presence in Hull. Labour do have a bit of presence in East Riding. And actually, this is where it's really interesting, because the source election this is, we see this as much more like a local election than a general election. The turnout is much more local election level. The issue is actually, this is not about electing an MP. It's not about forming government. So it's really still about local issues and local, or that might be the strategic stuff, it's still about local. And on that framing, locally, Labour do better than the Tories in terms of vote across the patches as well. So although it's, Labour are suffering, we do see it as between us and them. So and there are a lot of Conservative voters out there who are also open to voting for us to stop Labour winning.
I suppose it's quite an interesting one, because what Hannah alluded to there is kind of the line we do for these parliamentary by-elections as well, because you're able to squeeze Labour or the Tories in terms of, because it's not going to change the government. It's not, someone's not going to panic that the government's going to collapse tomorrow, regardless of what happens in Hull and East Yorkshire. So it enables people to almost take a punt, for lack of a better word, on actually, you might as well have the really good Lib Dem candidate because it's not a risk to the government. Now, the interesting thing is obviously what happens with Reform and what happens to that Labour vote. Now, because obviously Reform, we've seen in by-elections, are taking a chunk of that Labour vote, but we're also seeing that people who are willing to vote Reform, 50% of them are willing to vote Lib Dem. And some of the people listening to this will think, oh, that's disgusting. We have complete different political ideologies. Most people don't care about ideologies at all. They just actually want either to punish the government or still punish the Tories, and are looking for an avenue to do that. And that might be where you come in, Mike. In fact, there's a lot of disenchantment, and you might be the vehicle for it.
Yeah, I'd say it's really difficult, because obviously this is about election to a post that has all these strategic responsibilities and that remit. It's also an election. And so we're fighting an election campaign. And as part of that, we are saying to people, you use this as a way of sending the message to the government, because people like to do that in elections. And so we are giving them that option to do so. I think in terms of that sort of Reform / Lib Dem vote, I think certainly I would expect Reform to do better amongst Conservative voters in these ridings, say in Labour ones in Hull, than amongst Lib Dems. There'll be some, obviously, who might have voted Lib Dem. But I think the point you're making there is really around, it's not so much that people necessarily ideologically signed up to what Reform sign up to, is that they are using it as a way of expressing their disgruntlement. And the Lib Dems, when I first started campaigning all those years ago, we were experts at being that sort of, the language then around being that protest vote. I mean, I don't completely say we should use that sort of language, but that is what people are doing. They're voting for us as a protest. And if we can get people to recognise that they can vote for us instead of Reform to do that, then all the better.
And I'm really curious here, because obviously I don't use the term protest vote much, because and also the worry about, if you do want to get that kind of vote, it's a very shallow vote. Yeah. It's a bit like what Keir Starmer's finding now. He had a very wide support, but it was incredibly shallow, and the cracks turned up as soon as he got into power, and he's struggling to hold that electoral coalition together. Now, how do we go about, because obviously, first of all, we want to win. That's cool. But what you said before, Mike, about, it's about basically liberal values and standing up to Reform, because you were saying before about, who is actually challenging Reform. Well, it's got to be us as well. If we want a better, more progressive Britain, then we've got to also promote our liberal values.
Yeah, and I think the approach that, I give credit to Ed and the team here on this one, that the way he's standing up and making comments around Trump and the way that the other party leaders are not, and things like that, it's not necessarily directly against Reform, but it's certainly against the sort of things that the Reform leadership would be spouting. And I think we have an opportunity here to carve out that part of the political landscape, so that we are clearly against this and we're clearly for this in a way that we're not going to hear from the likes of Keir Starmer or Kemi Badenoch. And actually, I think that would be the right thing to do. We won't get the support of everyone with it, but no political party ever can. But there's definitely a good sizable cohort of voters that would ascribe to what we're saying and want to hear a party leader saying it.
And I suppose it'd be remiss of us not to talk about your opponent in this election. So it's quite an interesting one, because obviously you're the leader of Hull City Council. Now, I believe the Conservative candidate is the leader of East Riding of Yorkshire Council. Yep. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So that must be quite interesting, because didn't you sign the devolution agreement together?
So, I get on with Anne, and I'm hopeful that we can have a good relationship through to the end of this campaign as well. Obviously, as I said before, I see this as more of a challenge between ourselves and the Labour candidate in any event. Anne and I work closely on this. We can both claim credit for getting the devolution done. I think actually, the fact that we in Hull, as a Liberal Democrat administration, had to change position to go down this route, wouldn't have happened without me essentially doing that. But yeah, we get on fine. The Labour candidate is someone who nearly won in Beverley and Holness at the general election, 124 votes out, but has not been elected to East Riding Council before. There's a Green candidate has been announced. There's a Yorkshire Party candidate. Welcome to Yorkshire. And soon there'll be a Reform candidate announced in the coming days. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some sort of random independent comes forward as well, but so far certainly there'll be 6.
Yeah. Hannah, are we a little bit surprised? I mean, the Labour candidate is a lady called Margaret Pinder, who's a local parish councillor, and as Mike said, narrowly missed out in the general. Are we a little surprised Labour aren't putting a slightly more higher profile candidate in here, as we've seen in other areas, or does that say something about Labour actually just rewarding someone that's done effort, or does it say that maybe they don't think they can win this?
I mean, I would not possibly like to comment on the selection processes of the Hull and East Yorkshire Labour parties. They will have run their selection however they run their selection. It certainly sounds like this individual was pretty close to becoming elected to Parliament. So closer, you might say, than Oliver Coppard ever came when he ran against Nick Clegg in 2015. That's a Sheffield joke for those who know. But yeah, I can't possibly comment on Labour's selection processes. John.
Okay, so let's talk about, you don't want to talk about the selection process, let's talk about their campaign. So what level of campaigning are we seeing? Because I've seen a bit of direct mail from Reform that's been shot across my desk. What are we seeing on the ground, Mike?
Yeah, so Reform have clearly spent a lot of money recently. It looks like they have sent a letter, and I don't know if it's every voter, but it seems like a lot of voters or households across the patch inviting people to a rally, which are charging people a few quid to attend next week. There has been some literature from the Conservatives, obviously going back to the infrastructure point. I think they're having to pay for a lot of that to go out and Hull, not having the local infrastructure. Haven't actually seen lots. I don't think I've seen a single piece of purely, or not a lot of purely, mayoral election Labour literature yet. They had their candidate appear on the leaflets they are doing, rather than so much a lot of purely mayoral election. I think certainly my sense is that we are the ones that have got, I mean, good Lib Dem cans do this, don't they? But we are certainly the party that feels like we've got the most literature through doors so far, and it's been recognised. Well, of number of times people say to me, I've had lots of leaflets from you already, type stuff, which is really good, really encouraging.
And Hannah, does that say something about, because I'm getting like, I'm just moving on to myself just for a very, so I'm only defending 100 and something odd majority in my county seat against the Tories, and haven't had a single leaflet off the Tories at all yet, and that goes from other areas they're defending against us as well. It does kind of feel like the big two parties are in a sense of like post-election kind of deflation. For one, A, because they've got walloped, or B, because they've won. And it does seem that they're not going all guns blazing at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, I think everyone's in a bit of a state of post-election deflation. I know that, while the whole campaign is going really well, we got my sources tell me we got all of our December delivery out, got all of our January delivery out, well on the way to getting all of that February delivery out. I do know that there are areas around the country where Lib Dem teams have been waiting to see if their counties elections were going ahead or been cancelled. And I think the slump is probably real for a lot of people. I think there's absolutely nothing that Lib Dems love more than a big, exciting election opportunity. I think, Lib Dems in Hull have been on a winning streak, winning control of the council, holding control of the council, making gains against Labour. Am I right? Last May, Mike, so Labour were just in that I think you swapped a couple of seats around.
It's not. That's right. We held on. We went down a couple, but we certainly the year before that we made some gains. And so it's last year's local elections were probably tough in a sense than the previous one, because obviously people were thinking general election mindset, and and that kind of influencing how some people are voting. I think obviously we don't have that issue with this mayoral election, so people are sort of thinking differently. And
so for the whole team to have got through those elections and held the council in that sort of pre-general election Labour high point, I think that just tells you how kind of energized and motivated they are. And we didn't sort of particularly, we didn't fight the general election particularly in Hull. That team will have went through to Harrogate and Knaresborough to support getting Tom Gordon elected. I think that's all around. But I know that Mike's team is working really hard on making sure there's always something to do campaign wise, regular action days. I mean, Mike can obviously tell us more about this and sort of what's going on and what people can go and get involved with.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely right. So there'll always be something that people can come and do to help. There's always leaflets around to deliver. There's always door knocking to be done, clerical work. I mean, this is, going back to scale, this is a big scale election, which means there's a lot of work to do, and we will need a lot of hands to make it happen. And, Hannah talks about the team. So this is not... So when we do elections in Hull, for the council, obviously we have like a small coordination team that oversees the whole thing, but there's still an emphasis then on the candidates to really lead their campaign in their ward. So I am a leading figure in this campaign, and obviously I have a lot to say about what happens in terms of message and direction and so on, but I recognise, and I'm trying to do my absolute best to allow people who are in place to do jobs, to let them get on and do jobs rather than to interfere too much, because the scale of it would be impossible if I try to interfere in everything. And so we have a good team of people covering all sorts of stuff. We've got the two organisers for Hull East Riding. They are got a real lead role in terms of delivering, making things happen. But then, we've got a lot of support from volunteers and other people around a campaign team. And there's a lot of coordination work that is going to do. We're having Hannah laughed at this when I told her, but we're having daily calls, much like parliamentary by-elections, because it's just that scale of the campaign just requires constant contact with each other in terms of keeping on top of what's going on.
And how's that doing? Oh, go on, Hannah. Go on.
Just to say as well, I think the real challenge probably for Mike and the team there is keeping that energy going, because we had to start this one early. You couldn't have done this in a parliamentary by-election 6-week turnaround time. But when your team is going like full blast from December, it's we know how hard it is to keep the momentum and energy up over all of those weeks. And when people get to the point where they're like, well, I've done my bit, I think I'll go on holiday now. So that's why it's really important that people keep helping and don't leave it all on a relatively small core of people to keep going for so long.
I think that sort of time and momentum around this is key, and I make this point partly around this election, but also there will be more of these in the future which will be winnable for the party. So it's a broader point in terms of the learning of it. We technically couldn't really kickstart the process until we knew this election was actually happening. We could have selected on the off chance it's going to happen, but we didn't. And that wasn't until September, which kickstarted the selection process. The selection process, I won't get into the debate around the party's rules and selection process, but they are what they are, and so we had to work with those. And that did mean it wasn't until sort of mid-November that I was actually selected in place as the candidate. So from that point, we were then able to hit the ground. And the important thing about that is there's no sort of new trick about this. It's about visibility, getting name out there, momentum, and a lot of the work from November through to really about probably March time is around getting volume stuff out to people, so that because people aren't necessarily thinking now around the mayoral election, but what we want obviously is by the time they've seen my name a lot of times, and the volume literature that we're getting through doors is definitely helping with that.
And for those Lib Dems, local government reorganisations, I've certainly had chats with, the Cumbrian team, thinking, okay, they know that mayor's coming up soon and they're already getting that planning. So if your council's going to be reorganised and things like that, it's just a really good hint to start, okay, get your plans in place. Start thinking, okay, where you're going to sit, how many seats you're going to contest, where can you possibly win? Because basically, if I didn't have elections this year, I'd be in Hull. That's my but and with so few of us having elections, if you do have time, and obviously we know 2024 was knackering. It was a really long slog for those of us that had double elections that year. But do think if you could take a team of 5 or whatever to one of these seats, that makes such a huge difference. If you can, sorry, go on, Mike.
I was going to say, in terms of coming home and riding, doesn't have to be Hull. There's plenty of riders people can go to as well. But I would sort of actually, slightly self-motivated, of course, but sort of encourage people to do that, particularly actually those places that potentially have winnable mayoral elections or mayoral elections coming up next year, say, to actually come and see what's involved, because in some senses it's like a normal election, but there's other stuff that's just a bit different, and so just understanding the scale of it would be useful for people to come and just experience it. And this is the opportunity to make history for the party here, to win one of these first metro elections. So my message to people is come and be involved in that.
And of course, one of the things we always talk about, it's, manpower. We talk about having the right data to be able to win. And when you have like good campaigns like we have in East Riding and Hull, that's really useful. But the other thing is about money as well. And if you're thinking about the cost of the Lib Dems of trying to win a seat like this, which is really prohibitive, as Hannah's already said, just doing the basic stuff in terms of a deposit and getting involved in the booklet, but actually, in order to Mike to win, and I can say this even if Mike's probably not too shy to say it, he will need money. And so if you go to the website mikeformayor.org.uk, there is a donate button on there. For every £1 you spend makes it more likely that Mike can get over the line. Because if you think about, he's mentioned about reform, he's mentioned about the Tories, he's mentioned about Labour, they might not be great in terms of manpower or motivation at the moment, but they will throw money at it, and we've got to match it. Isn't that right, Mike?
No, absolutely. So our campaign team, the cost put together for the campaign is around £100,000. That's not small fry at all. And I've done a tremendous amount of work in previous years raising the money for the local election campaigns, but for those we've been talking maybe more in the region of 30 or £40,000 per to find. So to more than double that for this election has been a challenge. Now the good thing is, there are people out there who want us to win and think we can win, and so are backing us. But we still have a gap to go, and it's probably still multiple thousands that we need to raise. So thank you for plugging the financial side of it and the donations, and thank you to anybody who can give any amount, from £5 to 5,000, whatever people can give, it will make a difference.
Oh, you know what? He's done that really well, Hannah. I'm just looking at that donate button. It's just staring at me now. I feel. I feel that, and then even though I'm not do it. I feel like I'll have contributed somehow to it.
Mike said £5 to £5,000. I would also say if anyone has £50,000 that they would like to donate to the campaign, that would also be absolutely fine. Donations are not capped at £5,000. But go for it.
That's why we have a compliance team at HQ to deal with those big hitters. That's absolutely right. But Hannah, your final kind of. Sorry, go on, Mike.
No, absolutely. It's you're right. I think my understanding is that the other campaigns are doing okay on the financial side, and so we do need to match them.
Yeah, and it's likely as well because again, so few areas have elections this year. It is a relatively small set of elections that the bigger parties and people that have got lots of money can funnel their resources. They might not have motivated manpower to it, but they can absolutely send money into areas like into Hull and East Yorkshire to be able to give their candidate as much oomph as they can, even if they're nowhere near as good as Mike in terms of campaigning, etc.
John, you were right. They don't pronounce the H here, so you're completely right with your pronunciation there. So, what I'd say on that, the other thing just to think about this is, because it's such a small set of elections this year, actually, in terms of capturing the media narrative, to win this election, would do that. And so there's a tremendous opportunity to actually come out of this local elections with a fantastic headline for the party that will then see us through momentum-wise for a while after that as well. So, but that's only going to happen if we can win it, and that's only going to happen if people come and help or give them money or do both.
Yeah, and you know what, I had completely forgot about, because we always talked about it, Hannah, on previous episodes when we've had the parliamentary by-elections. Part of that is actually about that keeping us in the papers, because while Reform and Bainlock and Starmer are like kind of are being like a circus, it's very difficult for the Lib Dems to get any sort of press. Us winning a huge seat, as well as, and also for those of you that do have local elections this year, it is really conscious that, and I have heard from some Lib Dems saying, well, what's the point in us doing well, I'm going to use my example, in Lancashire, if Lancashire's not going to exist in 2 years' time? And I understand that logic, but I completely refute it, because actually, can you imagine on May the 2nd, we have a big seat win and the Lib Dems make the most gains of any party in the whole of the country. That's a narrative no bugger can deny us, and that's really important why we get over that line, Hannah.
Well, I mean, if people want to win seats on the new unitary elections next year or the year after, and let's assume that they do, and they're not just going to do that weird Lib Dem thing of just like retreating back into parish councils, you have to win your county seats this year. It's much easier to hold a seat than and do the work than it is. Yeah. I never.
The flip side of that is also, Hannah, in the sense of it's much harder for the opponents to win if they don't win it this time, because they don't have the infrastructure and resources that comes from having councillors in place.
If we roll over and let other parties win loads of county seats, that's going to make it so much easier, for those to win in those big unitaries in a couple of years' time. No, there's no excuse whatsoever for binning this one off just because the council is not going to exist for very long. Can I just do a little plug?
Always.
Thanks. So
I'm nervous now, but okay, go on
then. So if people like Mike, which of course they will do after this podcast, and would like to hear more from him, I would like to just mention that spring conference is being held in Yorkshire this year. People are probably starting to just get the vibe that Yorkshire is the centre of the universe.
Whoa. We're stopping that straight away. You are now banned from this podcast.
Okay. I mean, I'm neutral, John. I wasn't even born in Yorkshire. This has just come to me over the years. So spring conference is in Harrogate in a few weeks' time. You can still register for conference online. And Mike is always at conference, but you often don't notice him because he's generally hiding behind the scenes, being our chief steward. However, you will definitely get to see him this time, because the Yorkshire and Humber Liberal Democrats are hosting a fringe event at 1 p.m. on the Saturday with a panel of lovely Liberal Democrats talking about what's next for the Lib Dems in the north. And our star guest on that is, of course, Cllr Mike Ross. So people should be booking their tickets to come to Harrogate. Harrogate is not that far from Hull and East Yorkshire, is it, Mike?
It's about an hour and a half. I spent many, many days in Harrogate. Our family live in Harrogate, so it's a lovely place.
There you go. So if people wanted to have a lovely weekend in Harrogate and then maybe tack on a couple of days either side and bob over to Hull or East Yorkshire and do a bit of campaigning, beautiful opportunity there for you all.
Absolutely.
And oh god, I feel like I've got to do a plug now. See, Hanny, we're such party loyalist shills now that actually Mike is also going to the Winning Against Labour conference happening in Manchester as well. In fact, you both are. You're both guest speakers. I refused because I'm going to be out beating Labour in Lancashire. But it should be that's on March the 8th in Manchester. Again, if you want to know more information, it's actually on the ALDC website, as well as it might be on the party website. I'm not exactly sure, but that's a really useful thing, because one thing we are finding is that we have fantastic opportunities against Labour coming up, and for those of us who have been fighting Labour for a long time, in fact all three of us have, it's quite nice that they're off their little perch that they've been peering down from for the last.
It's been a really interesting experience. I did it. So here, particularly with them being in opposition here, I appreciate it's different for Hannah in Barnsley, which place I got to visit recently and enjoyed my time with people over there. Having Labour in opposition here has been, I think, a really unsettling experience for them. They've not. It's really been discombobulated, right? And a sense of, oh, the government's doing bad things, and that's us. It's like, so yeah. It's been. I won't dwell on it too much, but it's been quite a moment. Yeah.
Oh, you can do it. Well, I'm going to dwell on it. It's been lovely for me to actually see all their righteousness come crashing down in the council chamber. Is absolutely glorious sometimes, not realising that they're not the heroes of their own story. Go on, Hannah.
My loss genuinely are still quite righteous, actually. I had a delightful full council a couple of weeks ago where I had 5 Labour men shouting at me that the plight of the WASPy women was all my fault. They didn't for 1 minute think about the optics of maybe perhaps getting a woman to talk on that matter.
In Hull, the Labour group on WASPy voted for, well, it got a bit amended, but voted for a motion which called the decision of the government shameful. I thought that was an interesting choice from a Labour group to call the Labour government's decision shameful. This was pointed out in Parliament by Steve Darling. Yeah.
Yeah, so we had this is a final tangent. So we did the WASPy motion as well in Preston, of which case the Labour group amended our motion. Actually, it was a really good amendment. There's nothing wrong with that. They strengthened it up. They added lots of criticism about how the WASPy women have been won. It was their amendment went public on like the Tuesday, and Labour government refused to then pay out WASPy women on the Wednesday, and so it was absolutely horrendous for them scenes. But that's some of the troubles. We're going to get into Labour in future episodes about where they go, how things are happening with them, and what this means for the Lib Dems. But I think on behalf of all of us, Mike, thank you so much for coming on. I'm generally quite excited to see what you can do in this campaign. And it's the thing about these big seat campaigns, whether it's the parliamentary by-elections or Mike's attempt, it's actually really enjoyable. Whether you're going to learn, and we have several of our kind of campaigners and councillors, this is what really gets them kind of going in terms of their energy levels, to feel part of something big and historic. And so, like Mike said earlier, if you can come down, even if just for once, come down with a team, take it all in, learn more techniques, get enthused about it, and then go and help Mike win. It's a win-win-win for the party.
It's the old, without wishing to quote supermarkets too much, but it's the old Tesco line around every little helps, really. If more people come and help, the better it'll be. And just on the fun thing, so as I say, my mum was a councillor in Sussex. She knows the team here in Hull, and I remember her saying many years ago how much she enjoys coming up and spending time with the team here, and how much fun it is. Like, people in Hull know how to have fun, and the selection across Honey's Riding is a lot of fun. They're great people, and you'll meet some great people and have a lot of fun if you come and help.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much, Mike. I must plug the website again. It's mikeformayor.org.uk. You can find loads of information about Mike, his campaign, where you can find links to help out, where you can donate, really important. And I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and just donate some money to you now.
Thank you very much.
But thank you everyone for watching and listening this episode. Obviously, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you follow us on all our social media. And we haven't yet come off X, but I think it's probably time. But regardless of all of that, we will be back with loads more episodes and things like local government reorganisation. We are going to do lots of episodes on that, because I know lots of councillors and campaigners have lots of questions about what it means, how they go forward. So we'll be dealing with all that in future episodes. But in the meantime, have a great rest of your day, and thank you very much for watching and listening.